A dream that we've known about at the start of One Piece was Zoro's dream to become the best swordsman in the world. And for him, that meant to beat the current best swordsman in the world, Mihawk. Early into the series, Zoro and Mihawk fought, and Mihawk completely destroyed him. But he saw potential in him. He told Zoro, "You should surpass me." And throughout the series, we've seen Zoro go through various fights trying to get stronger, all building for this fight with Mihawk. Because it makes sense that this is going to be the fight that determines who the best swordsman in the world is, right? I'm not so sure. I think to become the best swordsman in the world, you have to defeat the best swordsman in the world, and I think I have pretty solid reasoning to say that the best swordsman in the world isn't Mihawk, it's Shanks. I think some of you guys watching may think I'm just thinking, oh, it must be fun to just imagine the idea of Zoro fighting Shanks, haha. No, I'm just saying, narratively speaking, I think it could make sense. But to talk about why it makes sense, we gotta talk about the Zoro and Mihawk fight, and I don't think that makes as much sense as people think. When Mihawk and Zoro fought at Barati, that was very good because very early into the series, Zoro understood, wow, this guy is strong. This is a hurdle I'm gonna have to overcome. Mihawk saw something in Zoro and thinks that Zoro has the potential to surpass him. So it makes sense that, okay, these guys are gonna fight later in the future because he's the greatest swordsman in the world and he wants to be the greatest swordsman in the world. And also Zoro being one of the main characters, it makes sense that at the end of his story, he achieves his goal. And I think for a long time that made sense, but I don't think it makes sense anymore. I think the story was building up their fight quite nicely, but truthfully, since the time skip, it hasn't been built up at all, and that's why I don't think it makes as much sense as it used to. And you may ask yourself, what changed? Why did it make sense pre-time skip but not make sense post-time skip? During the time skip, Zoro trained under Mihawk. And you may think back to when Zoro asked Mihawk to train him, because Zoro says he still wants to beat Mihawk one day and surpass him, but he does want Mihawk to train him so that he can get stronger. And even though Mihawk scoffed at this, he just says, you know what, that is quite interesting. I'm all in, because he wants Zoro to surpass him. But the thing is, since the time skip itself, I don't really like that dynamic that they have. And I'm not saying that student and masters can't become enemies, because we've seen it happen before in like anime and other media. But it's more so like, since the time skip, I feel like I haven't seen Zoro really mention Mihawk. Even when Zoro found out that Hawkeye was in the Cross Guild, he wasn't like, oh, what is my rival up to right now? Because I feel like, okay, if like you're a really great swordsman and you want to be the greatest, you kind of see each other as peers maybe, but it seemed that Zoro just saw him and he was confused of like, that's weird, it's not really Mihawk's style to work under anybody. And that was it. You're not thinking what your rival's up to. Like if Luffy found out someone was very close to One Piece, he'd be like, oh, I don't think Zoro sees Mihawk as a goal anymore. He still wants to become the world's greatest swordsman, but the way that the story treats them and kind of talks about them, it doesn't feel like we're building towards something anymore. When Mihawk beat Zoro, there was this thing he was dealing with in his head, this idea of like how much stronger he needs to become. Sometimes even fighting with the injury that Mihawk gave him. And we see him make steps on trying to improve as a swordsman. And like you get in your head, okay, they're building for this fight. But post time skip, even though Zoro is getting stronger and you can see he's still actively working on it, you don't really talk about the idea of facing Mihawk. Does it mean that Zoro doesn't think Mihawk is the greatest swordsman in the world? No, he probably does, but I'm saying two things really matter when discussing this. The narrative inside the world of One Piece, what the characters think in their relationships, and us as the viewers. Because as the viewer right now, I don't see why we should really particularly care about that fight. Although I think the Mihawk fight doesn't make as much sense for Zoro because they're not actively building towards it in the story, we still have this idea that Zoro wants to become the best swordsman in the world, and Mihawk's known as the best swordsman, so it's still there even if they're not building on it. But let's get back to the point for a minute. Zoro versus Shanks. Narratively speaking, does that fight make sense? Not really. Let's look at it like this. Logically speaking, when would Zoro fight Shanks or Mihawk? Because right now, Zoro has no reason to go up to Shanks and just start throwing hands. He does have reason to go up to Mihawk and have their fight, but the way how Oda likes to do things, I feel like he's going to make the fight for the world's best swordsman be plot relevant. It's going to tie into the bigger plot somehow. And to make it plot relevant, we have to look at it like this. Not why Zoro would fight Mihawk or Shanks, but why would the Straw Hats fight the Cross Guild and the Red Hair Pirates? It seems very likely that the Straw Hats are going to come into conflict with both of these groups in the near future. Both the Cross Guild and the Red Hair Pirates have both announced that their goal is to get the One Piece. And a lot of people throughout that series have said they'll become the king of the pirates and find the One Piece. Well, like, we're approaching the end game of One Piece right now. 3 of the 4 road poneglyphs have been found, and the Red-Haired Pirates have at least 2 of them. All these groups trying to find the One Piece could make sense as to why they fight, but the question is, let's look at it from like a viewer perspective. Will these be enjoyable? Because right now, if you look at the heavy hitters on the Cross Guild versus the entirety of the Straw Hats, it's not a good fight. I guarantee the top 4 Straw Hats can just dog walk Crocodile, because Luffy's already beat him. Alvida, Daz Bones, and all these other people, they're complete fodder. And then there's just Mihawk. But the way how most One Piece arcs work is that Luffy would beat the strongest person that they face in that arc, and then Zoro would beat the second strongest. But this time, since it's Mihawk, I'm pretty sure Luffy wouldn't have an issue letting Zoro be the one to try and fight him or finish him off. And then maybe we gave Luffy a fight between literally everybody else at the same time to make it interesting. But truthfully, it's not that interesting a fight, or at the very least, I don't think the Cross Guild would work as antagonists for a main arc. Let's look at the Red Hair Pirates. This one works significantly better because we don't know a lot of the full strengths of the Red Hair Pirates and we haven't seen them fight, but like Shanks versus Luffy's a banger fight, Zoro versus Ben Beckman, maybe Usopp versus Yasop, and like the matchup in my head makes a lot of sense, and I think it'll be like a tough fight for the Straw Hats. I think it'll be interesting and people want to see Shanks. My concern with this though is that Luffy versus Shanks makes a lot of sense and Zoro versus Ben Beckman because they're the number 2s, but the entire point of this is that Zoro should fight Shanks. I think Shanks is the best swordsman in the world. Luffy fighting Ben Beckman doesn't make any sense, so who would he fight in that arc? Also, for being real, I don't think the red-haired pirates are going to be the antagonist of a major arc. Shanks has some ties to the world government, and it's all but confirmed as to what that is, but the thing is, due to that, you understand that there's a reason why him and Luffy could have some level of conflict, apart from just the One Piece. But also at the same time, it's very clear that he likes Luffy. Even his crew likes Luffy. They have Usopp's dad on the crew. But I think the conflict between the Straw Hats and the Red Hairs can make sense if the Red Hairs were minor antagonists in a bigger arc. But before I get into that, let me finally explain why I think Shanks is stronger than Mihawk. Right now in the One Piece community, saying Shanks is stronger than Mihawk isn't a hot take, but saying that Shanks is a swordsman is. And all these arguments that say Shanks is not a swordsman, he's a hockey man, they don't make any sense. Mihawk uses hockey too, and every time we've seen Shanks fight, it's been with a sword. By what Oda qualifies as a swordsman, why what people in the world of One Piece qualifies as a swordsman, logically speaking, that would make Mihawk stronger than Shanks because Mihawk has been acknowledged as the strongest swordsman in the world, and Shanks is a swordsman too. And I bring this up to say that people who think Shanks is a hockey man and not a swordsman, and that's why he's stronger than Mihawk, I kind of need to win your guys' side on this because I need people to support this idea so I don't get torn apart in the comments. This YouTuber actually makes a pretty good video going in depth of the debate of why Mihawk is stronger than Shanks. It makes a lot of sense. He pulls from a lot of points and a lot of sources that I'm even sourcing right here. And what's crazy is that he's still wrong. I know, it's mad. Like, he has all these points. He's wrong. But why is he wrong? 'Cause I said so. Of what we've seen in Shanks in the new saga, like post time skip in One Piece, it feels like he's gonna be a far more important character to the story than Mihawk. The way his Conqueror's Haki made Green Bull paralyzed. How his Haki is so strong, he accidentally just knocks out people. Which you could say, oh, that's poor control, but also maybe it's just showing how powerful his Haki really is. And even in the manga, when he pulled out Divine Departure, like the way the story's setting Shanks up to be one bad dude. Because Shanks is a very mysterious character at this point of time, they can build it up so that he is more powerful. There's all these theories about him, how he can actually use Haki to bring his arm back, how he lost his arm on purpose for some reason, or how Luffy ties into his master plan now that he's awakened. All the factual data we've collected may favor Mihawk is stronger, but One Piece is ongoing and all the data on Shanks isn't out yet. And Oda is clearly not against retconning aspects of characters. In a recent chapter, he tried to make Jewelry Bonnie seem like a good person who would help others and only target bad people, completely ignoring that in her first appearance, she discourages Zoro from helping someone who's bleeding to death, and is confused by the idea that a pirate would help someone they don't know. So I don't think that it's out of the question that he would rewrite the idea that Mihawk is the strongest swordsman in the world. And I truly think he's going to build up Shanks' power level. Let's talk about the king of the pirates, Gold Roger. Fuck, I gotta Google this. Gold Roger was the king of the pirates, and when Kaido and Luffy fight, Kaido implies that Roger was the strongest ever because of his ability of Haki. But something about Gold Roger that people don't seem to understand is that he was also a swordsman. The strongest pirate in the world was also the best swordsman in the world. And even though Roger was the strongest, there's not a rule saying that you need to become the strongest person so you become the king of the pirates. But Zoro becoming stronger than Luffy violates the narrative of One Piece from the viewer perspective. So making Zoro stronger than Luffy this late into the series is just too jarring from our perspective. And especially after Wano, I don't see like how Zoro's even close to Luffy in terms of power. Since it makes sense for Luffy to be the strongest, all we have to do is make the world's strongest swordsman, not the strongest person in the world. There's someone else the story is built up very well to become the strongest person in the world, Blackbeard. And Blackbeard ties in heavily into this canon I'm making in my head. Because I don't think the Cross Guild or the Red Hair Pirates are good antagonists for a major arc. But Blackbeard will be a perfect antagonist for rather the final arc or maybe the second to last arc. And if we phrase Blackbeard as he's the strongest person in the world, if Luffy beats him, he will be the strongest. But also, Zoro can beat Mihawk and Shanks and then he'll be the strongest swordsman in the world. Hold on for a sec. Let me cook. I've developed a headcanon in my head, or fan story. I don't know what you want to call it, but I've pretty much found a way in my head to make all of this make sense. How you can have the fight for the world's strongest swordsman and get Mihawk involved, but also have Zoro fight Shanks at the end. Logically speaking, we can just have Zoro and Mihawk fight each other separate from the plot. At any point in time or between arcs, Zoro and Mihawk could just put out word for one another, then meet up and have their duel. But that's boring. At the end of Just Rosa, the narrator was talking about how the members of the Straw Hats Grand Fleet will be involved in a war like the world has never seen before. And I think during that war, I don't know, it doesn't have to necessarily be like all the pirates versus the Marines. For all I know, it could be the Cross Guild versus the Straw Hats Grand Fleet versus like other pirate groups. I don't know, it could be a lot of things. I'm saying in a huge conflict like that, I think you would have it so Zoro and Mihawk fight, but that's not gonna be Zoro's final part of the series. I think Zoro can fight Mihawk there and defeat him, but through that I think Mihawk could give a reason as to why he stopped fighting with Shanks. Because Mihawk says he has no interest fighting a one-armed man, so people say, oh, so Shanks is washed after he lost his arm. But at the same time, when Shanks pulled into Marineford, Mihawk says, I did not agree to fight red-haired, I am gonna go, bro. No, it's not happening. I don't think Mihawk came off as scared, but I feel like there can be a reason why he did not want to fight Shanks outside of their friendship. Mihawk's epithet is Hawkeyes. But according to one of the official One Piece data books, Oda toyed with the idea of his epithet being Mihawk the Clairvoyant, someone who can see into the future. And with the introduction of advanced observation haki, I don't think it's crazy to say that, I'm lying, it's absolutely crazy to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Mihawk can probably see into the future, and maybe when he sees the future of Shanks, he sees Shanks do a feat that shows that he is far stronger than he was ever showcased before, revealing that he's the strongest in the world. Or maybe Mihawk already knows Shanks is stronger and they've been keeping it a secret on purpose for some reason. It could be anything, just as long as Zoro beats Mihawk and he reveals that Shanks is stronger than him, we can keep moving towards Zoro versus Shanks. And that leads me into the final arc of One Piece. If Zoro beats Mihawk in the second to last arc, and in the very last arc, I don't know who the main antagonists are, because it seems like right now I'm having trouble deciding, is the main antagonist going to be the Marines, or is it going to be Blackbeard? Like, it could be anything. Or it could be space people, that's another theory. But if Blackbeard is the main antagonist of an arc and you get the Marines involved, because Shanks has some level of ties to them, I could see Shanks trying to pull up on Luffy's crew and say, Luffy, I can't let you go through and do this. And Luffy wants to stop Blackbeard, but Shanks, for whatever his reasons are, is trying to stop Luffy. And that's when Zoro can step up. Zoro after defeating Mihawk, Zoro after having this conversation about the strength and the warning of Shanks, I can see Shanks and Zoro having a fight as part of a bigger arc, because Shanks being a main antagonist doesn't make that much sense, because like I said before earlier, because of his relationship with Luffy. But him being a minor antagonist in an arc, and Zoro and Shanks fighting while Luffy goes out to try and beat Blackbeard, or maybe he's trying to get to the Marines and Blackbeard happens to be there and fight them, it just makes sense to me. The only aspect I don't like about Zoro versus Shanks right now is Zoro. There's a lot of focus on Shanks and Luffy as characters, but Zoro hasn't had much shine in comparison. Even though the Straw Hats are becoming more notorious, it's still mostly the Luffy show, and Zoro's bounty lags behind, especially in comparison to some less deserving people. I think he needs someone to push him over the top that puts him in the conversation of the strongest characters in One Piece. Right now, these are probably the strongest active characters. Zoro beating Mihawk could do that, but I think the story needs to build him up with smaller feats so the audience is more receptive to Zoro beating Mihawk and potentially Shanks, if and when that fight happens. Do I think this fight will actually happen? I'm not sure, because I know it sounds like, oh no, I'm just saying this because it's interesting. No, part of me thinks that narratively speaking, this can make sense. I'm not sure if the Zoro vs. Shanks fights ever happens, but I do genuinely think that we're going to get a reveal, maybe not in the near future, but in the future, that Shanks is stronger than Mihawk. And that is my theory. And if you like this One Piece video, you can click on these One Piece videos by my head and watch it so YouTube knows that you like this type of content. Alright, I'm Lee Simba, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.